It's estimated that elder abuse affects between 1 and 2 million older adults nationwide. Tonight on The Best Times, we examine the continuing efforts to fight elder abuse in our communities and hear from two national experts who think these efforts can be a model for the nation. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you. Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. Elder abuse comes in many forms. It can be physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. It can be financial exploitation. Even simple neglect is a form of elder abuse. For the past 4 seasons on this show, we've focused on elder abuse and examined the unique way that Memphis is addressing that problem. The Coordinated Response to Elder Abuse Team, or CREA, has been in place now for about 4 years. CREA brings together police, prosecutors, social service agencies, healthcare organizations, and more to collaborate on solving elder abuse cases. This multidisciplinary team approach has produced successful results, helping victims of physical abuse find a safe haven from their abusers, pursuing and prosecuting those who financially exploit the elderly. These kind of results are drawing national attention. Tonight on The Best Times, we find out why many cities are looking to Memphis and the way we are focusing on elder abuse. In February of this year, members of the Coordinated Response to Elder Abuse Team are meeting at a day of training and technical assistance of the National Collaboratory to Address Elder Mistreatment. The speakers have come from major cities around the country to present their methods of identifying elder abuse in healthcare settings. Among the presenters are Farrell Moore and Laura Brown of Baptist Memorial Hospital. Their protocol for identifying hospital patients who are victims of elder abuse is becoming a model for other healthcare systems to follow. And it is identifying elder abuse that is often the difficulty in addressing this issue. The National Center on Elder Abuse estimates that nearly 10% of the elderly population suffer some form of elder abuse each year. That translates into 5 million victims. The costs of elder abuse are enormous. Victims of abuse have a 300% higher risk of death, and financial abuse of elders costs billions of dollars each year. Statistics show that 60% of the abusers are family members, with 2/3 of them being adult children or spouses. Because elder abuse is often a family affair, cases will often go unreported. Some estimates put the number of unreported cases as high as 1 out of 23. Elder abuse, in its many forms, is largely an invisible crime, but the impact on its victims is very real. At age 72, Willie Watson was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. His daughters put him in an assisted living facility, but the ever-increasing costs became prohibitive. Willie was moved into a smaller private home that had been converted into an assisted living facility, housing 6 residents. This home was less costly, But Willie's daughters soon found out that this affordability came at a high price.
So within about 30 days of my dad being there, he just went down. His health degraded such where he was not walking. He walked in there, but 30 days later he was not walking, not mobile at all. There were signs that I got throughout his 30 days that, you know, intuitively just didn't feel right for me. Why am I waiting at the door? Why am I ringing the doorbell for 5 minutes and you're not answering? And I know you're there. Food, you know, empty plate of supposed food, but there was no food odor in the room. So, I mean, they were staging. They were staging it for my visits. Visiting time was between, 9 and 5. You can't come in the evenings. You need to call before you come, that kind of thing. So there were red flags that I got. So, after I was done and convinced that something was wrong, I called an ambulance. I had an ambulance service to come get him, and I took him straight to the hospital. We were there for about a week. He was dehydrated, bed sores, the body was just really, had deteriorated a lot.
The anger that Terica felt turned to frustration when she tried to report her father's experience after the fact to the authorities. The State Health Service, the police department, and the district attorney's office told her they couldn't take action because her father was no longer in imminent danger.
No one even opened a case for me. They knew what the law stated, and they knew that it wasn't going anywhere, so they didn't even bother to open a case. I had pictures, I had, hospital records, doctor's notes, documenting what they saw once I brought him to the hospital, but it's just in a file now, so.
Willie Watson is now in a new assisted living facility, and Terica is comfortable that her father is being treated well. But her anger and frustration remains.
For me, when it comes to family, I'm like a pit bull. And I think most people are very protective of their family members. So it was frustrating to have those type of emotions, but no resolution or justice. So very frustrating.
This is the cautionary tale of Donald McClurg, a decorated World War II veteran, a college graduate. He became a successful sales executive after the war and built a comfortable life and a family with 3 children. All of them would grow up to become lawyers. In 2009, Donald lost his wife to cancer. While living in Florida at age 93, he was befriended by a 38-year-old woman who told him that she too had cancer, but didn't have the money for treatments. Over the course of a year, Donald McClurg gave her $90,000, almost half of his life savings. The woman was lying.
She was a proven con artist. She had 2 other complaints filed against her with the same police department for elder exploitation that had never been prosecuted, which was one of the reasons she's been able to continue this, because these cases are so often underreported, and even when they're reported, they're very rarely prosecuted because of several reasons, but one is the victims don't make good witnesses.
This is one of the rare cases of elder financial abuse that was actually prosecuted. But it took the efforts of Andrew and his sister, who are both lawyers, a tenacious detective, and a willing prosecutor to convict this woman.
She pled guilty to a second-degree felony, made fairly substantial restitution. The prosecutor said it was the largest restitution he'd ever seen in a case like this, and this is the only type of case he prosecuted. But when you think about it, he gave her $90,000, he got back $50,000. She spent 2 days in jail, pled guilty to a felony, got probation, no jail time. And that was one of the most successful prosecutions in history. And it wasn't the prosecutor's fault, it's the nature of these cases.
In October of 2014, Florida enacted an elder abuse statute that uses the legal concept of permissive presumption of exploitation as a tool to convict con artists who prey on elderly victims. Andrew McClurg was one of the architects of that law.
If I had one central point to emphasize to everyone, it is, don't ever make the mistake of thinking your elder, your loved one, is immune from exploitation.
Bernice and Eddie are soulmates. Listen to what their daughter says about them.
Have you ever seen the movie The Notebook? Because my dad and stepmom are the African-American versions of The Notebook. They literally are. And their interaction is what gives them a better quality of life.
Bernice and Eddie are both 86 years old. Bernice has Alzheimer's. Eddie's mind is sharp, but his eyes are failing him. So certified nursing assistants care for them in their home on a daily basis, and a local family member tends to their finances. One day, Carolyn, who lives 500 miles away in Indiana, received a disturbing phone call from their CNA. A letter had arrived notifying Bernice and Eddie of impending foreclosure proceedings against their home because of failure to pay their taxes.
And I was appalled when she read it, because my dad and I had had conversations many times before, and I would ask him, I said, Daddy, did you pay this? Did you pay that? Because, you know, this is due here and so forth. And he would say, oh yes, it's being taken care of. And I had no reason to doubt, so therefore I went along with it. Well, when now the CNA is reading this letter to me, I realized that none of that has indeed been taken care of.
Bernice and Eddie were victims of financial abuse and neglect, and the abuser was a family member.
It's unfortunate that anyone would do anything harmful to senior citizens because they are so vulnerable, and especially a senior citizen who's aged and visually impaired and someone close to you. And yet, I think a person may not be in his or her right mind or heart to do something like that. So we forgive them and we move forward, but we also take measures so that that does not reoccur.
Carolyn came to Memphis, and with the help of Belinda Bryan of the Family Safety Center, she was able to straighten out the tax situation and save her parents' home. Through the collaborative agencies of CREA, Carolyn was also able to get legal services to give her power of attorney and draft a written will for her parents. She also obtained additional health care services for her father, who now required a more extensive level of care. But even more importantly, CREA gave Carolyn peace of mind.
When I leave, I can leave with peace of mind, knowing that CREA and all of their extensive social services and medical attendants will be able to have my parents in a safe environment, that I can come and see them, I can lie down at night with rest and assurance, knowing that they're getting the best care that they can. And that makes me feel very, very comfortable and at peace.
This story of financial abuse and neglect by a family member is a very typical scenario that occurs all too often. Carolyn says we should all learn from her cautionary tale.
Whenever it happens, whether you are watching it on television that someone has been taken advantage of, or whether you are the recipient, it's still painful to know that people can be so harmful to others. And especially, as I say, it's like taking candy from a baby.
To find out more about the latest efforts in battling elder abuse and why the CREA team can become a model for other cities, I spoke with two experts on elder mistreatment from the Educational Development Center, a global nonprofit that identifies and promotes innovative programs focusing on health, education, and economic opportunity. Before we begin talking about the collaborative that was held here in Memphis, the training session, I want to step back and talk about elder abuse in general. Let's go back to the beginning. Define elder abuse for our viewers.
You take this one, Kristen.
Sure.
Yeah.
So elder abuse is the abuse or neglect of an older adult. The age of an older adult varies depending on the state. It's usually 60 or 65. By abuse, we mean it can be physical, it can be sexual, emotional, psychological. It also includes financial exploitation and even self-neglect in most states, or many states. Yeah.
How serious a problem is it?
Well, the prevalence studies vary a lot. So we see estimates between 1 in 6 and 1 in 10 older adults experiences some form of elder abuse.
And much higher among those with dementia.
And from what I understand, it's often unreported, or at the very least underreported.
That's a big problem with the studies because there's so much shame and stigma and isolation experienced by people who are having elder abuse that they don't often report.
Why does it go unreported? Why? I mean, these are crimes.
Yep.
Why are they not reported? And why are things not investigated?
I think that one of the reasons that people are hesitant to report is there's a fear of what will happen next. So there's the fear that if I report my loved one, or if I myself am being abused or neglected, and I report that I'll be taken away from the people that are abusing this person, which many times it's people whom they are very close with. So it could be a family member, or caregiver, somebody that they depend on for the things that they get.
I have read, and tell me if this statistic is correct, that 90% of the abusers are family members.
The phrase that you often see used in academic medicine is trusted others. So it may be a family member, and it often is. I'm not sure, 90% seems a little high to me, but it may be a paid caregiver. Sometimes it's somebody who...
a family friend who's not a friend.
Yep, or somebody, if they're a resident in a nursing home or a long-term care facility, it may be another resident. So unfortunately, there are a lot of folks out there.
Let's talk about the collaboratory that took place. Now, this was a national event. It was a training session. What was the goal of the session? What were you doing in this session?
Well, we were charged with bringing the national expertise that we have formed as part of this national collaboratory, the very best and brightest experts on elder mistreatment from around the country, to share new models for best practices, information about specific issues. Working with our colleagues at the Plough Foundation, they reached out to the fantastic people working in the communities on behalf of the CREA initiative and asked them, what are the kinds of questions that you have or issues that you want help with? And so we brought our national experts to speak to those issues, and of course one of the very best things about the day was we learned as much as we taught. We sure did. I mean, we can't say enough about the passion, the wisdom, the really effective work that's being done here in Memphis by the CREA initiative, and it's really a model, I think, for what can be done elsewhere.
The session focused on healthcare, identifying elder abuse in a healthcare situation. Explain that in general terms, if you would.
To talk about the National Collaboratory itself?
Sure.
Sure. So we're part of the National Collaboratory to Address Elder Mistreatment, which is an effort funded by the John A. Hartford Foundation and the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And what they've done is they've brought together, as Rebecca mentioned, some of the major experts in elder mistreatment from across the country. And our goal as the National Collaboratory is to develop a model for addressing elder mistreatment in the emergency department that can be implemented in many different types of emergency departments. So places in diverse geographic areas that have different levels of resources available, namely that they may not have access to an elder mistreatment expert in their area. And so I think we looked to the team in Memphis to tell us about their experience developing the CREA model and what they've done to screen for elder mistreatment in their emergency departments.
So it's a way, am I understanding correctly, it's a list of questions, if you will, or a protocol that that identifies this older person's injury and says this is an injury that occurred naturally, or it's one that didn't. I mean, is that a fair assessment of what you're trying to do?
Well, the care model that we've designed and done some initial pilot testing with has 4 elements, and one of them is a screening tool, a simple screening tool that will allow personnel, frontline personnel in the emergency department, to ask just a few questions to triage. Is this a person who may be at risk for having experienced elder mistreatment? If they screen positive to those first 2, one of the or both of those first 2 questions, then they'll get triggered to a deeper screen. with a series of questions, a physical exam, an assessment not only of the older adult, but the caregiver or the person who may have accompanied them, to really understand and do a more empirical, make a more empirical decision or a clinically informed decision about whether this is somebody who is really at risk of or has experienced elder mistreatment. And then the other elements of the care model have to do with training the staff to implement that. We have an assessment tool that allows the emergency department to really understand what capacity they have, what gaps in practice exist, so that they can prioritize the changes that they want to make. And very importantly, and one of the reasons that we're so amazed by what is being done here in Memphis with the CREA model is looking at the necessary surround. What happens in terms of follow-up back out in the community after the person leaves the emergency department?
Is it too early to gauge results from this approach?
Yes, we're just starting a national feasibility test this year.
You mentioned CREA, which stands for the Coordinated Response to Elder Abuse Team, which was formed several years ago to attack the problem of elder abuse. As outsiders from Boston on the national level, you've got a different viewpoint of things. What is your take on CREA and what is being done here in Memphis?
I think as we look at our care model that we're trying to develop, we've been working with clinical partners across the country to determine what is feasible, what do you need in order to be successful implementing a model like this. What we hear over and over and over again is that the emergency department cannot be the place that follows up with these patients, that it's really important to clinicians that they know that the person is going to be safe once they leave the ED, but they don't have the bandwidth to follow up with them personally. What I think CREA has done really well is brought together the people in the community that are necessary to help keep these older adults safe. And in order to do it well, they need to communicate with each other. In many communities, that's not happening. So I think what they have done is figured out how to bring all these different people to the table to talk about elder abuse.
Is there anything similar to CREA that's being done in other cities?
We haven't found any other city that has taken the kind of coordinated response, to use the C and the R from the CREA model, that's being done here in Memphis. And I want to emphasize how visionary and to some extent ambitious it is, and it's really provides a hopeful model. I think that it could be replicated elsewhere, because I know that it started.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it was going to, if that model could be used elsewhere successfully.
Well, we hope so. That's part of what we're aiming to do. Our charge was to begin in the emergency department with the care model that we're developing and testing, but we know that the issue doesn't begin there and it can't end there. So looking at what CREA has done as a community-wide response, I think is really where we hope that other communities will be able to go.
Well, now, to close out, looking toward the future, we know that our older population is going to grow dramatically in the next few years. If elder abuse is a problem right now, logically it's going to be even more of a problem in the future. So what is it going to take to attack the problem? A problem which often, as we said, goes unreported and unknown.
Well, we should both speak to this, because what I would say is it will take evidence of what's effective. It will take awareness in the broader community that the problem exists and that help exists. It will take building capacity both in institutions and in caregiving personnel. What would you add?
I would add that one thing we know is that a big risk factor for elder abuse is social isolation. And so I think that the work we're doing on the National Collaboratory and what the CREA team and Plow Foundation are doing are really important, but also there's a role for everybody in the community. So any older adult that you know, your friend, your family member, you could play a role by being a good friend to them and helping them stay connected socially. And when you see something that concerns you, to bring it to the attention of other people in Adult Protective Services as well.
And on that note, I will point out for viewers that here in the state of Tennessee, at least, if you report, you are anonymous. You remain completely anonymous. So, and you are, by law, required to report if you see something, by the way. So anyway, well, I'd like to thank both of you for being on The Best Times. I appreciate this discussion.
Thank you very much for taking up this important issue.
Thank you. Under Tennessee law, everyone is a mandatory reporter. If you suspect an older adult is being abused, call the Adult Protective Services hotline. Your report is confidential, and your identity will remain anonymous. In an emergency, always call 911 first. Want more information about life after 50? Go online to watch more shows and find more resources. And send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Chris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you.